Your royalties and your payments, how is that going to work? That's also included in your author's contract. You tell them there, all right, you're going to have 12% royalties, because remember, now you've already done your costing. So you know, you worked out all those sums, you did the calculations, you know I can actually only afford to give this author 12% royalties. Maybe at this stage with negotiation, you can propose that you give them 10%, because you know if they want to negotiate, you still have 2% that you can play around with. But if you immediately give them 15%, and actually that's the maximum that you can afford to make this book work in terms, financially, then you're screwed. Because then you cannot go up or down, and they may say, but I want 18, and you say, but you can only have 15, etc., etc. That's another thing about contracts. It is negotiable. It's negotiable up until the point where they have the final signatures. When they put their final signatures down, then you cannot negotiate that contract anymore. So make sure before you sign on the dotted line, as they say, that both parties are happy, both author as well as publisher. That's why I always say, a commissioning editor is actually supposed to go through the contract with the author, because authors don't always understand these contracts. They don't understand the terms in the way that we would, because we come from the business side, we come from the production publishing side. They come from a creative writing side. They don't think about it, and they just blindly trust publishers. And there are, unfortunately, all kinds of publishers out there who are a little bit, sneaky and maybe not too ethical. So you always have to make sure that there's a great, I don't know how to say this in English, but there's enough trust between the parties involved in a contract. And that should be reflected as well in the contract, that you're not out to get them. But the royalties and the payments should be specified. Sometimes with the royalties as well, they'll tell you that there is a gliding scale. If you sell over 1,500 copies, then we're going to increase your royalty rate to 11%, for example. Whenever you sell over 3,000 copies, your royalty rate goes up to 12 or 13%. You can also do that, because that's then a motivation from the publisher, from the author side as well, to also help with the marketing, because they know the more they sell, the more they will get per book sold. Right. Remember, there can also be different kinds of agreements in this regard, whereas you can, for example, also have profit sharing, or another way of actually doing this, like a 50% sponsorship, or your author says, listen, I had a NRF bursary that pays for my publication, so I'm contributing 20,000 Rand to the production of this book. Therefore, I want to benefit a little bit more out of the royalties. I don't know. There can always be different kinds and versions of contracts. Even if you get a sponsorship for a book, remember that should also have a contract on its own. Duties of the parties. That is, what are you responsible for? What am I responsible for? Because it's always good going back and say, but you had to do this, and no, you had to do this. If there is a breach of contract, so what that basically means is one of the parties did not actually did his or her part, but you need to be able to prove that, and in order to prove that, it needed to be stated beforehand that this was your responsibility and you didn't do it. It's also, that's why wording, phrasing, everything in a contract needs to be carefully formulated. It should not be ambiguous and leave any room for interpretation. If you know, I'm the author, I need to deliver my manuscript on the 6th of June, it needs to be 300 typed pages, blah blah blah, you can't get away from that, because that's exactly stated what your duty was. If you fail to do that, then you can immediately say, I'm sorry, that's contract breach. You did not do that. Now, obviously, people are not just shooting guns off left and right, and whenever you go, you do something wrong, they just, go out and say, but the contract says what the contract says. You always first start to talk to your author. Tell them, listen, you need to make this deadline. If you don't, we're going to be in trouble. It's going to affect the whole value chain, etc., etc., etc. If they still do it, you can always then, when it comes to a later stage, then you threaten them, in the sense, threaten is a bad word, but then you can basically say, legally, we have a contract, and I don't want to do this, but if I have to, I would unfortunately have to, refer you to Section A of the contract, which clearly states that you are responsible to do this. All right. Author warranties. Now, an author warranty is basically an author then telling you that what they are submitting is the original work. They didn't plagiarize. They didn't just what's the other word? But they didn't plagiarize. They didn't do copyright infringement or take someone else's work and post it as their own. It's original. It's theirs. It hasn't been published somewhere else before. And your warranties also, say for example you're doing recipes or you're doing instructions for crafts or I don't know what, that all the safety precautions are included. You're not writing anything to harm anyone, etc., etc. Listen, the publisher would in any ways do his or her work in the sense that they would, for example, still, like with recipes, they still do the recipe testing. Even if the author comes and says, listen, these are tried and tested recipes, they will still go and do that. They will still proofread for errors, etc., etc. But this just helps because a publisher cannot know everything. We know a lot. We're pretty cool. We know a lot, but we don't know everything. So it's not possible to know that, oh, this was plagiarized. Oh, she copied from that movie. Oh, she did this or she did that. So you trust the author that he or she is delivering original or new and fresh work, and it's not someone else's or passing it on as their own, or not, causing harm with whatever they publish, whether it's safety or in another manner. So this clause is actually included to protect the publisher. So if this is now coming out as a problem, etc., then you can always say, but you signed an author warranty to say that this is your original work. And you basically told us that this is your original work and you signed the contract. We cannot take responsibility necessarily for you being dishonest. But yes, people do. That's a tricky situation. We'll do a few case studies or something on that. But that is a tricky situation because how do you prove it? And you have to actually prove, even the person who's saying that this work has been copied. I mean, even Antjie Krog, Dion Meyer, all these big names have been involved in all kinds of copyright wars and cases, and especially with musicians as well. I think Ed Sheeran even, or was that other guy? I can't remember his name. Sam Smith. Yeah, Sam Smith. How can I not remember that name? But a lot of them have been implicated with copyright things of stealing, rhythms and riffs and whatever. So it's very interesting. I find this a very exciting field as well. But just make sure that your side as a publisher is clean and honest and all right. All right, then the acceptance and quality of the manuscript. This is also an important one. It basically says that you commission someone to write a manuscript. If you get that manuscript and it's not the best quality, or it's not what you instructed, or it's wrong, or basically poor quality, then you can always refuse to then publish it. Even if there was a letter of intent that the author said they're going to do it and you're here at contract stage, if your author is not delivering the standard of work that you asked for, you are allowed to basically say, I'm sorry, this is not good enough. But usually you have to first, that sounds very harsh, but usually you first have to give them another chance. So you have to work that into your schedule as well. So if you do receive the manuscript and you do see, oh crap, this is not what I actually thought, or the writing is really poor and I can't even fix it with proper editing, you can go back and say, I'm sorry, but you have to give them specifics and say, this was wrong, this character is not good enough in terms of, characterization or development or credibility, believability, etc., etc. And then you have to tell them, listen, so go and rewrite those sections. So you're allowed as a publisher to ask them to redo certain parts and then submit it again. If they then submit it and you're happy, then you publish. If they resubmit and it's still in poor quality, then you are allowed to say, I'm sorry, but this is just not on standard. I think when this usually happens, especially with new authors, because maybe you only read the first 3 chapters or the first few parts of a book, and then when you get the full thing, you actually realize that it's not that great. So it's also to protect the publisher, because you are investing a lot of money in publishing books. So this is also a part of protecting the author. It's bad for the publisher. It's bad for the author, obviously, but it also keeps the author on his or her toes, because I mean, there's still some value in being published or getting published by a big name or a traditional publishing house. So that's why, as soon as you know your manuscript has been accepted and the quality is good and everything is signed, you as an author should actually be very proud of yourself and be happy about that whole thing. And really, then that's where you get your affirmation, rather than, doubting yourself, because now you know, okay, I am good enough. This book is going to be good, etc., etc. The reviews and control as well, it's all just about, going through the manuscript, see if there are any problems. The reviews that come from the media, you as a publisher, also part of your duty is basically to make sure that the book actually gets the promotion and the exposure that it's supposed to, that it's available in the book chains, etc., etc. But also the reviews and control, you also have to help and see afterwards, how was it received? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? And then just go from there.